Lovely to see you again. We have 10 minutes with you. We're completely in your hands. If you'd like to leave some time for questions, please do so. Thank you.
Thank you. Kia ora tātou. We're going to try and cover our points in 8 minutes so we can leave some time for questions at the end, but we'll see how we go. My name is Andrea Nelson. I'm the CEO of Gymnastics New Zealand, having been in the role for around 3 months. With me is Sally McKechnie, Chair of the Steering Committee, which was set up to review the findings of the independent review into gymnastics, and Olivia Jobsis, whose voice was one of the ones that prompted the review and on whose bravery we've all built what is hopefully a wholesale change in the culture of gymnastics, which is what we're here today to really talk in support of. Firstly, we've got 3 points we want to cover. First is the need for an independent complaints body to deal with complaints of non-professional athletes. Secondly is the importance of that body having the voice of the child at its very heart. And finally, the incredible importance of mental health provision, both during the counselling process and in the long term. It's a lot to cover in a short time, so we'll move quickly. Firstly, I just want to mention that as a national sporting organisation, like many, we are funded only by membership grants and government support. We do not have a significant funding, and therefore our capability is limited to deal with integrity matters. I'm going to ask Olivia to speak to a little bit of her story to illustrate the need for an independent body. Thanks, Olivia.
Kia ora koutou, everyone. Thanks for having me. I did gymnastics when I was very, very young and competed at the 2006 Commonwealth Games and 2005 Worlds. That was some time ago, but in that time to now, as a 34-year-old, I spent much time in counselling and healing myself. A few years back, I was given the opportunity to share my story with the media, and I chose to do so, and I chose to do so with my name rather than anonymously. There was only one other who chose to do that. As a result, I became the place where everyone offloaded their stories, and they continue to do so till about a month ago. I'm still receiving messages from women who have been hurt and who continue to be hurt as a result of their experiences in sport. This is not just 1 or 2, this is like ongoing, over 100, just to me, myself, and my Facebook Messenger inbox. These women mostly had never raised their story before, or if they had, it had been dealt with inadequately, or they'd left the process often re-traumatized and really didn't want to see sport ever again. So many left their sport for good. Others just didn't feel that they could go to their own governing organisation to actually hear the complaints about the behaviour that they oversaw in the very first place. In sport, it's very small, it's very insular, and so it's very difficult to feel confidence in GNZ. In this case, it was GNZ that they were not feeling confidence in, and so we would argue that it's incredibly important that this opportunity is taken to make sure that there's an independent body for complaints to go to, so that I'm not receiving them, so that they're going to the people who know how to deal with them best and can actually make a difference in the sport practically for these women.
Thank you, Olivia. And we'll hear more from Olivia shortly. I just want to underline from the National Sporting Organisation's perspective, to give a sense of context, we spent 5% of our membership fees on one judicial process. Right? We do not have the capacity and capability to do this responsibly. So we are asking, we don't see it in the legislation, and we're asking that it's explicitly stated in the legislation. I'm going to ask Sally to briefly speak to the importance of child-friendly matters. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, committee. I'm going to highlight 3 elements that we've listed in the submission. 90% of gymnasts in New Zealand are under 12, and 79% of all gymnasts are females. So we strongly support this as Gymnastics New Zealand, but we ask that further steps again are taken to centre children and acknowledging the challenges of engaging with children in these processes. So as you'll have seen from the submission, we ask for 3 specific changes. The first is that the child-friendly processes are even more strongly reinforced than they are at present in the bill, and we've made a recommendation about amendments to section 13G, so that age appropriate, which from the work that I have been doing with the steering committee, which Olivia is on, engaging with children in an age appropriate way so as to give them support and options and empowerment is challenging across the community and is very challenging in sport. Secondly, we have asked for a child advocate. And what we have in mind here is something akin to counsel for the child in the family court.
Yeah.
We anticipate this won't be needed in many cases, but in gymnastics, it is clear, sadly, and I'm sure it is common in other sports, that in some instances, adults do not have the children's best interests at heart. Coaches, parents, clubs are invested in the success of that child, sometimes to the detriment of that child. So we are asking that this is reflected in the legislation in Part 5. Because it has financial implications, we're asking it's in the primary legislation, because to leave it to the code doesn't address squarely the financial ramifications of resourcing such a role. And finally, it's a more general request and acknowledgement about the challenges of engaging with children and their experiences. We're very pleased to see that that is reflected in the bill.
Yeah.
But we ask that you make clear that that is an ambitious goal and that expert input is required to genuinely achieve that. To have this as a SOP or a reference that isn't actually then stepped up because it's hard would be a lost opportunity.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sally. I'm now going to, in limited time, talk about mental health, which is always great. Two things. Firstly, as the need for an independent complaints body is not mentioned in the legislation, part of that, and a vital part of that, is the provision of counselling services to complainants, to respondents. I would say from my brief experience and review, it is absolutely critical and it would be irresponsible not to include that. So brief point on that. And the second, I'm going to ask Olivia to speak again on this, is the importance of a longer term consideration of mental health impacts of sport. So I'm going to ask Olivia.
Thank you.
As I said earlier, and I've received a number of messages, and these date back to the 1950s from various different sports, where women who are still struggling with coming to grips with the harms that they have suffered as a result of being international athletes much of the time, elite international athletes. So many of them have ultimately been groomed for violent relationships, drug and alcohol issues, high-risk industries like adult industries, mental health issues that are ongoing, lifelong eating disorders. It just goes on, and these are very real issues. These are very real women, and these are very, very real harms that are occurring that are not being dealt with, and that have an impact far, far beyond their time in sport. So it's incredibly important for these women's lives that this provision is made, because there's an ongoing impact.
Thank you, Olivia. And so specifically, again, to return to the role of NSO, it is not within the capability, of the best funded NSO to assess and manage this sort of load. It is not the core business, but it has to belong somewhere. And I can tell you I reiterate Olivia's point, the need is real and it's current. And we see this body as a place where we are asking this committee to direct the legislation that mental health provision in the long term is considered. We'll just leave some time now for questions.
I think we're actually out of time.
Oh, that was 8 minutes.
Well, your time.
That was 8 minutes.
Right.
I just tipped over. I've got two.
Go you, because I wrote it, I'm doing it manually. So I just I had one question around the brilliant submission.
Yeah,
Thank you.
submission.
Very thoughtful, very useful for us. I had just a clarification question around at point D around you talk about a primary code, and we suggest that the code should be elevated to a third party for sign off once the minister is satisfied that the consultation and engagement process has been sufficient. Can you just clarify what you meant by that, and who you thought the third party might be appropriate for? Sorry, I know there's all sorts of other issues, but that was one I didn't quite
Angie,
understand.
I'm very happy to speak to that. I'm a public lawyer in my day job, so I'm very happy to speak to this piece. It may be that it's the minister, it may be that it's cabinet, but at present we're concerned that the commission promulgates, consults on and signs off the code.
Yeah.
And consistent with our request that there be one code.
Yeah.
It may be a code with multiple chapters. Drug-free sport, for example, is not a chapter that needs to apply to everybody, but one code, given its fundamental significance, should have a second sign-off we request in addition to the commission.
Great.
It's the equivalent of someone marking their own homework.
Great, thank you. We have a question from Emily Henderson.
Well, it's actually more of a tautoko. I just want to say, as someone who's spent most of their professional life on the evidential procedures for children and vulnerable people in the courts, thank you. We will take that very seriously. And I think it's not just age appropriate, it also needs to be developmentally appropriate, because we'll be dealing with disabled athletes as well. And I just wanted to say thank you for what you have done to revolutionise sports in this country, and for the safety, and for your utter courage and bravery. I know I'm speaking on behalf of all of us when I say thank you, and we really honour what you're doing and the burden you've taken on for all sports participants.
Thank you. That's very humbling. Much appreciated.
And Emily has said it extremely well. Total bore those comments. And really appreciative. We are out of time. Really appreciative of this submission. Very useful. But thank you.
Really helpful.
We appreciate you coming before us today.
Thank you very much.
Ka kite.
Ke kaha go well.